Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Ken Lu. Coming up in this edition. The global equity market took a major hit on Monday, with Asian markets tumbling and Japan recording its largest points drop in history. Iran has vowed to retaliate for the killing of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has condemned the violent anti-immigration demonstrations that have taken place across the country. We begin from the global equity market. The market took a major hit on Monday. Asian markets have tumbled, with Japan recording its largest points drop in history amid a resurgent yen and fears of a U.S. recession. South Korea's Kospi index fell 10.75%, with the financial and high-tech sectors leading losses. Circuit breakers were triggered during intraday trade in Japan and South Korea to mitigate a free fall. Nasdaq futures sank 4.7%, while S&P 500 futures dropped about 12%. Economists at financial giant Goldman Sachs have raised the likelihood of a U.S. recession within the next 12 months to 25%. Japan's benchmark Nikkei index shed a historic 31,458 points to close over 12% lower. Meanwhile, European shares have also tumbled to a near 6-month low at the start of the week, following massive sell-offs in Asia on fears of a recession in the United States. All major European bourses opened in the red. Frankfurt sank more than 3%, while Paris slumped 2.6% and London shed 2.3%. Timothy Pope has more.
Every analyst comment that I've heard seems to include some kind of comment like it's an overreaction, it's panic selling, the data doesn't justify these moves, and so on. But that didn't stop the cascade. Korea's Kospi has shed more than 9%. Australia's ASX dropped about 3.7%. But Tokyo was where we saw the real carnage. The Nikkei 225 went through the floor. It collapsed 12.4%, shedding more than 4,450 points. Its biggest ever single session loss. It's really pretty incredible. Back on the 11th of July, that index hit an all-time high of 42,426, which means that the Nikkei 225 is actually in a bear market. Financial and energy shares fell the hardest in Tokyo. There were a whole lot of Japanese banks and shipping companies down around 20%. What we saw was a rush to deleverage on the Japanese markets. A lot of investors had been taking advantage of a very low yen to fund their investments, and when the currency jumped against the US dollar because of the latest data, those investments suddenly became a lot more expensive and prompted a lot of unwinding. Hence a lot of the remarks that we saw from analysts about an overreaction and particularly about panic selling.
Now it's Timothy Pope on the global equity market. In the Middle East, Iran has vowed to retaliate for the killing of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf says Iran's response will be crushing and smart. U.S. media has cited American and Israeli officials saying Iran could launch attacks on Israel as early as Monday. Iran and Hamas have accused Israel of carrying out last Wednesday's assassination. Israel has not claimed responsibility. Israel says its defenses are ready and its enemy will pay a high price for an attack. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
Israel is in a very high level of preparedness since pretty much Wednesday morning, since hours after these attacks, the killing of Fuad Shukur in Beirut, which Israel claimed responsibility, and the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, which Israel kept completely quiet about but is widely attributed to Israel. Ever since, there's high level of preparedness here and sort of nervousness because of the uncertainty of what might happen. Israel is quite sure that some kind of retaliation, both from Hezbollah and from Iran, will come. How big will it be? What will the extent be? That is a very big question, and Israel on the defensive end is ready for any situation. But if you go around in the streets, there's no special feeling up in the air when you walk up in the streets, but clearly some nervousness among people as reports are constantly coming saying that everybody should be prepared for an attack coming both from Iran and from Hezbollah. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, speaking in front of soldiers, said that whoever attacks Israel should be prepared for a very strong retaliation coming on behalf of Israel. Will that impress Iran and Hezbollah after 9.5 months of back and forth with Hezbollah? Not exactly sure, but at least on the defensive level, Israel is ready for whatever might happen. Israel has been waiting for this for pretty much 4 days. So far, nothing, but there's a clear understanding that some kind of a reaction from Tehran and from Beirut will eventually come.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting. Meanwhile, several countries have urged their nationals to leave Lebanon due to escalating tensions in the region and fears of a broader Middle East conflict. Many airlines have suspended flights to the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Hezbollah and Lebanese military sources said the 2 Hezbollah members died in an Israeli airstrike targeting the southeastern village of Hola. Zahra Al-Derzi has more.
Lebanese media have reported Israeli airstrikes on several towns in southern Lebanon on Saturday, leaving at least 1 dead and several injured. One strike hit a power plant at a water utility site in the town of Taibe. Israel's military has not commented on the incident. Hezbollah said in separate statements that its military unit, the Islamic Resistance, launched military operations against enemy sites along Lebanon's border with Israel. Hezbollah said it had targeted the town of Beit Hillel in northern Israel for the first time with dozens of Katyusha rockets after the Israeli attacks on the towns in southern Lebanon. France and Britain have called on their nationals to leave Lebanon as soon as possible, following similar calls by the United States and Germany. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut called on nationals to leave immediately by booking any available ticket to any destination, the second time in a week, as the U.S. State Department raised the security threat level in Lebanon last week to do not travel. Flights into and out Beirut International Airport continue to operate via several airlines, according to data on the flight schedule for Sunday and Monday, which shows some consolations. Lebanese media reported that caretaker economy and trade minister Amin Salam reassured that there are sufficient quantities of foodstuffs, but warned against hoarding operations because this negatively affects prices and the availability of quantities that should be distributed fairly among people.
That was Zahra Al-Derzi reporting from Beirut. In Europe, the British Prime Minister has condemned the violent anti-immigration demonstrations that have taken place across the country. Keir Starmer called them far-right thuggery.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow.
The unrest follows the killing of 3 children at a dance club in Southport. Rioting has spread across major British cities, including Liverpool, Bristol and Manchester. On Sunday, hundreds of protesters clashed with police by a hotel used to house asylum seekers near Rotherham. John Bever has details.
At more than half a dozen locations across the UK, demonstrations turned to violence. Protesters gathered to call for tighter immigration laws, but some started fighting the police or counter-protesters. Tensions have been high since 3 girls were killed at a dance class in Southport in northwest England last Monday. The suspect was born in the UK, but misinformation quickly spread online, claiming he was a Muslim immigrant who'd recently arrived in the country. Police have blamed much of the violence on the English Defence League, whose supporters have been linked to football hooliganism and Islamophobic ideologies. Senior police officers have condemned the rioting. The Chief Superintendent of Northumbria Constabulary described it as not being a protest, but unforgivable violence and disorder. In Nottingham, in the English Midlands, protesters and counter-protesters were out in force.
People are fed up of being told you should be ashamed if you're white and working class. Well, I'm proud white working class.
Well, I'm here because, there is an attempt to exploit a very tragic situation. This is a sort of nationwide protest that we've seen come out of nowhere. And Nottingham is a multiracial city, and we want everyone to feel comfortable in their own city centre.
Security has been increased at many Muslim places of worship across the UK. The policing minister said that the protests meant people felt unsafe because of the colour of their skin. After the violence in places like here in Bristol, the new Home Secretary has vowed a swift and robust response. She said that communities must feel safe on the streets and promised that there are consequences for breaking the law.
That was John Bever on the anti-immigration violence in the UK. Turning to the United States, in California, firefighters have been battling a massive wildfire that's now the fourth largest in the state's history. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection says this year's wildfire activity is up over 2,800% from a year ago. In Colorado, authorities have issued mandatory evacuation orders in some areas. Popin Putin has more.
The park fire burning in Northern California has scorched an area larger than the size of Los Angeles. As of Saturday afternoon, containment of the fire was at 27%. This is the same part of California that was engulfed by the 2018 Camp Fire, the state's deadliest, in which 85 people lost their lives. More than 6,000 firefighters are battling the blaze. In some of California, firefighters have adopted a strategy to strangle the fire by felling trees.
Our intent is to get just as close as we possibly can to the active edge of the fire and try to stop it where it is, using these conditions to our advantage to slow down the movement of this fire.
In other areas, residents are returning to their homes, facing charred memories.
It is intense because we knew it was coming for this house and this neighborhood directly, and it did.
Firefighters are also struggling to contain fires in the state of Colorado that began burning last week. Hot and dry conditions are hampering efforts. One person has been killed and over 50 buildings damaged or destroyed. Authorities issued mandatory evacuation orders Saturday. Thousands have escaped to safety.
We're in for a long battle. What's long? We don't know. We know this. We have three big fires in the state of Colorado. The national news is focusing on this one. And there's lots of reasons for that. But one, this is one of the most densely populated, and it has proven to be absolutely one of the most challenging firefights I've seen in my 15 to 20 years of been doing this.
The wildfires in Colorado and California are among almost 90 large fires burning across the western United States, according to the National Interagency Fire Center.
That was Popin Putin on the wildfires in the US. Now recapping today's headlines. The global equity market took a major hit on Monday, with Asian markets tumbling and Japan recording its largest points drop in history. Iran has vowed to retaliate for the killing of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has condemned the violent anti-immigration demonstrations that have taken place across the country. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tianlu. Thank you for listening.